Happy Wednesday, everybody. I'm sorry for the hiatus, but I took some time off with my family over the last month and a half here. I spent some time in China. I spent some time in South Korea. I spent some time in Japan. I spent some time in Vancouver, Canada, and I spent some time in Alaska. And I'm excited to get back at it and share some things with you and talk about some things that have been on my mind the last month and a half here. So today I want to talk to you a little bit about consistency in policy. Why do I want to talk about consistency in policy? Well, more on the academic side. I've been always very consistent in not allowing resubmissions or anything past our late window guidelines, but that's been on my mind this week. But then I started thinking about policy in the practicing space. So I want to start with a question that you certainly don't have to answer. And it's more rhetorical, and that is really, how many of you work at organizations that have consistent, standardized policies? I'm going to bet a lot of them are covered in dust, not updated, stale. They probably don't reference AI at all. I'm fortunate to work in an organization where we are constantly updating policies, but let's talk about what I mean by that. So what I mean by that is, are the policies complete? And can your community understand them? If they're not complete, or your stakeholders in the company can't understand them, what are your policies missing? If you do have policies, do your employees acknowledge them, or are they really just a document hanging out in SharePoint or on an intranet somewhere collecting dust? So let's talk about my views on the subject. First, I think every policy needs an owner. And it really needs backing by executive leadership, right? They need to review, they need to approve, and maybe most importantly, they need to support those policies and not continuously come to you and say, hey, I need you to grant an exception for this, I need you to grant you an exception for that every single week. I'm people that know me, I'm very much against being the party of no. I'm very much for being the party of yes, but I think in terms of policies, they're just pieces of paper for not enforcing them. I think the other thing that's really important to me is that you have some sort of versioning and mandatory policy updates. You know, what good is a policy that was created 3 years ago? It's probably not keeping up with the times today. We're probably not referencing AI. We're probably not referencing our DevSecOps people, all of these things that exist today that maybe weren't in place a few years ago. I think it's a little like government policy. We don't want our policy in practice to be outdated. It needs to address the things that are going on in the world. And again, we need to be enforcing it. I think another thing that I find myself repeating all the time, whether we're talking about the academic space with like late submissions and some of those things, or the practitioner space, is that, I've said it time and time again here this morning, policies are useless if we aren't following or enforcing them, or if we're granting exceptions to everyone that asks. So I want to get your thoughts on that. I'm sorry for repeating myself a number of times there about enforcement, but I think it's important. I will just say I went through a situation, not my practitioner job, but talking through with someone who just didn't understand why they couldn't get an exception to a policy that was in place outside of my day job. And I think it's important that we start drilling it in there, that policies are there for a reason and that we need to follow them. Or if we are granting exceptions, folks need to understand the risks. And someone in executive leadership needs to support the risks that we're taking. So what are your thoughts? What do you think about what I just said there? Maybe next time we could talk about a core set of policies that every organization should have. I also want to talk a little bit about my perspectives on CruiseCon. If you haven't been to CruiseCon before, there's a fantastic opportunity that's coming up in 2026. I will be at CruiseCon again in 2026. I just used some of my continuing education funds to schedule myself there. So hopefully I can see some of you there. I'll talk more about it in another video, but glad to be back, and thanks for watching.